Imagine, for a moment, a person responsible for unfathomable cruelty, an individual who has committed acts so monstrous they defy human comprehension, now confined within the walls of a maximum security prison. Now, picture them receiving hundreds of love letters. Consider the unsettling reality that some of these individuals are even offered, and sometimes accept, marriage proposals from complete strangers on the outside. This isn't a plot twist from a dark novel. It's a disturbing, yet very real, cultural phenomenon. We are talking about the unsettling truth of why serial killers, men who have inflicted the deepest wounds imaginable upon others, become the objects of intense obsession, adoration, and even romantic love for a specific segment of the population, predominantly women. Why do serial killers get fan mail? Why do some people genuinely fall in love with monsters? This question probes into a truly unsettling corner of human psychology, exploring a phenomenon known as the serial killer groupie. It's a concept that might initially feel uncomfortable, perhaps even offensive, to consider. After all, the natural human reaction to such individuals is revulsion, fear, and condemnation. Yet, the evidence is undeniable. From infamous figures like Ted Bundy to the most recent perpetrators of heinous crimes, there exists a persistent, undeniable attraction from individuals on the outside. This fascination extends beyond mere curiosity about true crime. It delves into a complex psychological landscape where the lines between justice and perverse desire become profoundly blurred. This deep dive into a dark aspect of human behavior promises to be both revealing and, at times, deeply unsettling. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about attraction, human connection, and the strange ways in which our minds sometimes interpret power and control. We will explore the motivations behind these peculiar relationships, delving into the real stories that illustrate this disturbing trend, and seeking to understand the psychological underpinnings that drive some individuals to seek intimacy with those who have committed outrageous acts. The root of this peculiar and often baffling phenomenon, this unsettling attraction to individuals who have committed outrageous and violent crimes, can often be traced back to a specific psychological term, hybristophilia. This concept describes a sexual interest in, and even an explicit attraction to, those who are known to have committed various forms of criminal offenses, especially those involving severe violence or notorious acts. The very word hybristophilia is derived from Greek, where hubris refers to an outrage or excessive pride, and philia denotes a strong affinity or preference. It's a term that perfectly encapsulates the paradoxical nature of finding arousal or affection in the shadow of profound wrongdoing. Psychologists and forensic experts who study this phenomenon often link it to a complex interplay of underlying factors. For many individuals who exhibit hybristophilia, there is a documented history of past trauma, often stemming from abusive relationships or childhood experiences. In some cases, the attraction may represent a subconscious desire for control, or perhaps a distorted perception of it. There's also an undeniable fascination with danger, a pull towards the extreme that can manifest in highly unusual ways. While hybristophilia is not exclusive to any gender, it is observed overwhelmingly in women who become attracted to male serial killers. Many of these groupies claim to see the real person behind the gruesome headlines, believing they possess a unique ability to understand, empathize with, or even redeem the seemingly irredeemable. They often construct elaborate fantasies around the incarcerated individual, allowing themselves to fall in love with an image rather than the horrifying reality of the crimes committed. The historical record is replete with examples of notorious serial killers who, despite the unspeakable nature of their crimes, garnered devoted fan bases and even romantic partners while incarcerated. These cases serve as stark, real-world illustrations of hybristophilia in action, demonstrating how the darkest figures can become objects of public fascination and personal obsession. One of the most infamous examples is Ted Bundy. A charismatic, intelligent, and outwardly charming man, Bundy confessed to the brutal murders of over 30 young women across multiple states in the 1970s. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his depravity and the horrific details that emerged during his trials, Bundy received hundreds of love letters from women across the country while awaiting execution on death row. These letters often contained declarations of love, support, and even marriage proposals. The allure of his manipulative charm, even from behind bars, proved irresistible to some. In a shocking courtroom spectacle, Bundy famously married Carol Ann Boone in 1980, during the penalty phase of his Florida trial, while she was on the witness stand. Their relationship continued while he was incarcerated on death row, and incredibly, they even had a child together during this period, a daughter born while Bundy was awaiting execution. This public display of devotion from Boone, despite the full public knowledge of Bundy's heinous crimes, remains one of the most compelling and disturbing examples of a serial killer finding love and familial connection within the confines of prison. The case of Ted Bundy continues to serve as a cornerstone in discussions about hybristophilia, illustrating the powerful, albeit twisted, attraction some feel towards extreme danger. Another chilling example of a killer who captivated admirers from behind bars is Richard Ramirez, infamously known as the Night Stalker. Ramirez terrorized California in the mid-1980s, committing a horrifying spree of murders, rapes, and assaults. His satanic imagery, menacing appearance, and random, brutal attacks made him a figure of profound public fear. Yet, even as he faced multiple death sentences, Ramirez developed a significant following of female groupies. In 1996, while incarcerated, he married Doreen Leoe, a magazine editor who had exchanged letters with him for years. Despite the undeniable evidence of his horrific crimes, Leoe publicly defended Ramirez, steadfastly calling him kind and fundamentally misunderstood. She remained devoted to him until his death in 2013. Ramirez, like Bundy, had multiple groupies who regularly attended his court appearances and wrote to him, captivated by his dark persona and the aura of extreme danger that surrounded him. Their unwavering support, in the face of such monstrous acts, further underscores the powerful psychological forces at play in hybristophilic attractions. The unsettling trend of individuals forming attachments to convicted killers extends to figures who commanded intense loyalty even before their capture, blurring the lines between cult following and romantic obsession. Perhaps no figure embodies this more than Charles Manson. Before his arrest for orchestrating the horrific Tate LaBianca murders in 1969, Manson had already amassed a devoted cult following known as the Manson family. This following remarkably persisted even after his incarceration, with numerous individuals remaining loyal to his twisted ideology and charismatic, albeit deeply disturbed, personality. While in prison, Manson continued to receive an astonishing amount of attention, including frequent marriage proposals from women eager to commit themselves to him. One of the most notable instances of this occurred when he was in his 80s. Manson famously married Afton Burton, a 26-year-old woman, while he was incarcerated. Burton, who also went by the name Star, had dedicated years to supporting him and advocating for his release. Her unwavering devotion, despite the global awareness of Manson's heinous crimes and his complete lack of remorse, serves as a profound example of how a captivating, dangerous persona can continue to exert a powerful, almost hypnotic, pull over others, regardless of the horrifying reality of their actions. Moving from figures who cultivated followings to those whose sheer depravity defied understanding, we find that even the most gruesome crimes did not deter some admirers. Consider Jeffrey Dahmer. His crimes, involving the murder, dismemberment, and cannibalism of 17 young men and boys, were so unspeakably horrific that they shocked the world and firmly established him as one of history's most gruesome serial killers. Logic would dictate that such a figure would inspire only repulsion. Yet, despite the truly abominable nature of his acts, Jeffrey Dahmer also received fan mail during his imprisonment. In these letters, some individuals, primarily women, chose to ignore the horrifying details of his crimes. Instead, they expressed sentiments that, in retrospect, appeared deeply disturbing, with some even calling him cute or strangely misunderstood. This baffling reaction highlights a profound psychological disconnect, where some individuals project qualities onto a killer that are completely at odds with their actions, perhaps seeking to humanize or even infantilize them in a twisted attempt to make sense of the incomprehensible. Finally, we observe this phenomenon continuing into more contemporary cases, demonstrating that the allure of the monster is not confined to historical figures, but remains a disturbing reality of our modern world. Chris Watts murdered his pregnant wife, Sean N., and their 2 young daughters in 2018, a crime that shattered the idyllic image of his family life and shocked the nation. The public watched in horror as his deceptive facade crumbled, revealing a cold, calculating killer. Yet, even after his full confession and conviction, Watts began to receive an influx of letters from women during his imprisonment. Many of these letters contained declarations of their love, their unwavering support, or even intimate personal details, with some correspondents sending him photos of themselves. The motivation behind this outpouring of admiration for a man who committed such a devastating act against his own family defies conventional understanding, highlighting the enduring, albeit unsettling, nature of the serial killer groupie phenomenon. It forces us to acknowledge that this disturbing attraction remains a present-day reality, affecting even those whose crimes are devoid of any superficial charisma. Delving deeper into the unsettling phenomenon of hybristophilia, psychological experts offer various explanations for why some individuals, predominantly women, find themselves drawn to convicted serial killers. These explanations often trace back to deeply personal experiences and complex psychological needs, rather than a simple fascination with evil. One prevalent theory suggests that many of the women attracted to killers have a history of past trauma, frequently stemming from previous abusive relationships or difficult childhood experiences. For these individuals, the idea of a relationship with someone who is physically confined by prison walls can paradoxically feel safer and more controllable than a relationship with someone in the outside world. The distance inherent in prison incarceration means that the incarcerated partner cannot physically cheat on them, cannot inflict direct physical abuse, and cannot simply abandon them in the immediate sense. This unique dynamic creates a perceived sense of security and predictability, fulfilling an unconscious desire for control that was perhaps lacking in their past relationships. In this confined environment, the admirer can maintain a fantasy version of the relationship, largely dictated by their own terms and idealized perceptions, without the messy realities and vulnerabilities of a conventional partnership. They are in control of the visits, the letters, and the narrative, giving them a sense of power in a relationship that is fundamentally defined by the killer's lack of freedom. Beyond the perceived safety of distance, other psychological drivers also contribute to this unusual attraction. Some women may be drawn to the fame and notoriety associated with these high-profile criminals, finding themselves inadvertently caught up in a dark form of celebrity. This can manifest as a Bonnie and Clyde fantasy, where the individual imagines themselves as a partner in crime, albeit one from a safe distance, sharing in the perverse allure of rebellion and danger. This fantasy allows them to experience a thrill, a sense of excitement and significance that might be absent from their everyday lives. For others, it might be a subconscious desire to be seen as special or unique, the one person who can understand, tame, or even redeem the seemingly irredeemable monster. This belief in their own transformative power can be a potent draw, giving them a sense of purpose and elevated self-worth. They might project an idealized version of themselves onto the killer, seeing themselves as compassionate, empathetic, and uniquely capable of seeing the good in someone the rest of the world has condemned as pure evil. This often leads to a distorted sense of empathy, where the focus shifts from the victim's suffering to the killer's perceived vulnerability or past trauma, rationalizing their horrific actions. Furthermore, some psychological theories suggest an underlying desire to align with perceived strength or dominance. In a twisted evolutionary sense, a highly dangerous individual might be subconsciously seen as a powerful protector, even if that power is expressed through violence. This deeply ingrained bias can sometimes override conscious logic, leading individuals to mistake cruelty or aggression for confidence and power. While intellectually knowing it is unwise, some individuals may still be drawn to this perceived alpha quality, a deeply unsettling manifestation of primal instincts in a modern, complex context. The unsettling phenomenon of attraction to serial killers is not merely a historical oddity. It is profoundly shaped and amplified by modern obsession culture, driven largely by the pervasive influence of digital media. In today's interconnected world, serial killers and their crimes have regrettably been transformed into a form of perverse celebrity, a grim byproduct of our society's insatiable appetite for true crime. Social media platforms, countless documentaries, and an ever-growing array of podcasts have, perhaps unintentionally, contributed to the elevation of these criminals to a celebrity status. This ubiquitous exposure means that individuals like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer are no longer just figures from historical crime archives. They are constantly re-examined, re-narrated, and, in some unsettling instances, romanticized within the public consciousness. Some fans, in their relentless consumption of true crime content, begin to dangerously blur the line between an interest in justice and a morbid form of entertainment. The nuances of investigation and victim impact can become secondary to the compelling, often theatrical, narratives surrounding the perpetrators. This Netflix effect, where highly produced true crime shows delve into the psychology and lives of killers, can inadvertently make them appear charismatic, complex, or even misunderstood to viewers, rather than simply evil. The cinematic portrayal, the deep dive into their backgrounds, and the focus on their perceived genius can lead to a dangerous normalization or even glamorization of their monstrous deeds. Nowhere is this blurring of lines more evident than on platforms like TikTok. Here, short, viral videos dissect criminal cases with alarming speed, and unfortunately, some content creators and their audiences engage in actively romanticizing certain killers or, disturbingly, claiming they are hot or aesthetically appealing. These trends, fueled by algorithms and rapid sharing, contribute to a culture where the horrific realities of the crimes are often overshadowed by superficial or sensationalized portrayals. The consequences of such content are profound, as they can desensitize viewers to violence and implicitly encourage an unhealthy fascination with perpetrators, rather than fostering empathy for their victims. The very real suffering of victims and their families is often lost in the pursuit of viral content and fleeting digital fame, turning genuine tragedy into a source of morbid entertainment. This leads us to deeply uncomfortable ethical questions that society must confront as true crime continues its cultural ascendancy. The narrator challenges every viewer to consider, where is the line between genuine curiosity about the human psyche and a dangerous, almost perverse, obsession? This question strikes at the heart of the issue, probing whether our fascination with darkness has gone too far. It forces us to question why some segments of the public appear to show more empathy, or at least more fascination, towards murderers than they do towards their innocent victims. Why are the psychological complexities of a killer so often explored in painstaking detail, while the profound suffering and shattered lives of those they destroyed are often relegated to a secondary, fleeting mention? This imbalance in focus raises serious concerns, suggesting a broader desensitization to violence within our society. When the acts of murder become mere plot points or character studies for entertainment, the true horror of taking a human life risks being diminished, replaced by a morbid intrigue that prioritizes the perpetrator over the pain and loss they inflicted. The ending message of this discussion serves as a critical warning, extending far beyond the specific phenomenon of serial killer groupies. It cautions that this isn't just about the individuals who become romantically entangled with serial killers. It's about a more pervasive societal trend, who we choose to sympathize with, and how we consume stories of human cruelty. It's a call for introspection, urging us to examine our own relationship with true crime and violence. The final thought leaves a lingering, powerful impression. It's okay to be interested in true crime. It's okay to seek to understand the darker facets of human behavior. But it is profoundly not okay to ignore the inherent horror and immense suffering involved in favor of fantasy, glamorization, or a perverse sense of entertainment. This powerful conclusion reminds us that true crime at its core is about real tragedy, real victims, and real consequences, and our engagement with it must always be anchored in respect for that reality.